Hey, let's sync up real quick because this is gold, Jerry. Would you like to start today?
Sure.
Go, go ahead.
Intro, take one. Today we can. Christ. Intro, take two. Hey everyone, it's Elliot.
And Todd. Welcome to Two Designers Walk Into a Bar, an ongoing conversation about pop culture and iconic design.
Today we continue talking about the formation of the pop art scene.
And the introduction of its greatest superstar.
He made the lowbrow highbrow.
And along the way agitated a lot of people.
So let's raise our glasses to the master manipulator himself back here in the bar.
This is great. We're talking about pop art. And question for you. See how good your memory was from the last episode.
Oh boy. Okay, a quiz already.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a couple oddball things that led to the formation of, starting to lead to the formation of the pop art scene. What stood out to you?
Well, of course, the church. I think the biggest thing was that there were all of these happenings in Greenwich Village. There was a sort of scene, but it wasn't really yet a scene. And there were these people who were starting to collide with one another. And they were really, like the Beats, starting to push back against what they saw as this encroaching culture. Really just kind of conservative and sort of smothering. And they wanted a way to push back at it.
Yeah. They were people with jobs in the commercial creative field, and they were looking at that as inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they painted billboards and all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah.
Did layouts and stuff. You know, another thing that I thought was really kind of interesting about that whole formation was a real dichotomy. Like you said, Greenwich Village was sort of the hub of where pop art was. The Upper West Side was really where the Beats were camped out around Columbia, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. The other thing was just how amazingly pervasive television became in just a decade.
Yeah. Westerns and just family sitcoms, westerns. It's just really these two or three things. And then, as you said, TV became more imaginative. I believe the word you used was untethered. So it became a little bit more surreal, right? You had people trapped on islands, genies coming out of bottles, all kinds of things like that.
Yeah. Shit could happen.
I know you love going to flea markets and you're always rubbing on stuff there, but I hope you're up to date on your shots. Let's put it that way.
Cool. Well, yeah, today, we're going to dig a little bit more into the formation of this scene. And there was a guy that was kind of missing from our previous episode, right?
Yeah, you talked about him and then you never talked about him.
Yeah, well, where was Andy in all this?
Right.
Well, if you remember, I said he was both part of the scene and not part of the scene. And I think, what we certainly are not doing a biography on Andy Warhol or the factory because he's done plenty of those himself.
Right, he doesn't need our help.
But what we were interested in, when we were talking about this was how did this scene happen? How did the factory become the factory? And so for me, it was interesting to learn more about his background. And he was an emerging artist because at the dawn of the 1960s, he was 31 years old then, and he was by multiple accounts, the most successful and highly paid illustrator in New York City.
Yeah, we had talked about this. He was doing illustrations for shoe companies. He was illustrating jazz albums.
At $100 a pop.
For
the shoe company.
Yeah, he had that beautiful lettering that you had talked about in a lot of his illustrations that maybe his mom did, maybe he did.
His mom probably worked on. Yeah, if it was drawings of angels or cats, she probably did those too.
Yeah, I love all this.
So he, while super successful as a commercial artist, was looking to emerge as a fine artist, and he wanted those connections from the other folks that were his contemporaries at the time, particularly Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns, who sort of a little bit ahead of him in that scene. But to many, he represented the ambitions of pop art. He emerged from poverty. Everyone knows his family were Eastern European immigrants living in Pittsburgh. He had a very sickly childhood, very shy, super anxious, and he went on to elevate work of everyday lowbrow common objects and packages, news clips, and to highbrow uptown museum art. And in doing so, one thing that we like about him is he elevated himself to pop culture icon status, right?
Yeah, sure. So he's sort of artist as celebrity, but to your point, he wasn't this lofty, fine artist that people were used to. He was taking these common elements that were these cornerstones of consumer culture, like we talked about, things everybody was familiar with, but he sort of spun them in a new and interesting way that made people stop and take notice, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned the jazz album covers, too, and he did a lot of those. Mm-hmm. And he got to be super successful because he worked his ass off, basically.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about this a little bit, but I think this is one of the myths, especially during the factory era, right? Is that, he just sat around and he had these people coming and going and he never actually did anything.
Well, I do think that starts to play out later, but I think there were reasons for that. But go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, but to your point, when he was getting started, he grounded out. He was working all the time.
Yes, yeah. So he graduated high school when he was 16, and then he attended Carnegie Institute of Technology, which is now Carnegie Mellon, and graduated from there at 20, and then moved to New York, where he began working as a commercial artist. And, he was, if you've seen his early drawings, he was really good at drawing, and he had this penchant for celebrity culture and glamour. And again, he just had this dream, this ambition. And oddly enough, his first project was for Glamour magazine. It was for an article entitled "Success is a Job in New York."
Oh, wow. That's so perfect.
Perfect. I know. Yeah. And here's the funny thing, people know his birth name is Warhol. By accident, the magazine's typesetter left off the last A at the end of his surname, and he became Andy Warhol, and he just kept it like that.
Oh, that's amazing. I never knew that.
Yeah, it was purely by accident, and he was like, yeah, okay.
Slightly less ethnic, perhaps.
Yeah. So throughout the 50s, he was working for well-known magazines like Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, New Yorker, and he produced advertising and window displays for local New York retailers and gained some local notoriety, even winning some awards from Art Directors Club and the AIGA, too.
Heard of those organizations, yeah.
Yeah, decent organizations, right? So he earned a pretty solid reputation in the fashion illustration world, mainly for a company called Miller Shoes. He would get, I think I mentioned this a minute ago, get about $100 a pop for each drawing he did of shoes or hats or scarves. But it added up, man. By the end of the 50s, he was bringing in about $100,000 a year from shoe drawings. That is well over $1 million a year in today's money. So not bad for drawing shoes.
Yeah. Todd, that reminds me, I got to go. I got to, rather than do this, I need to finish my shoe drawings.
You got to go do some shoe drawing. Well, good luck with that. Yeah, good. Yeah. I hope you get $100 a piece, too.
Yeah, me too.
He had enough actually to buy his first townhouse. It was a 4-story townhouse on Lexington Avenue. He bought it for $60,000. Isn't that something?
That is.
And even in today's money, because I know you love to do the conversions on that.
I do.
That's still, and I'm going to say only $614,000.
Oh, is that
in today's money? Yeah. It's on the market for a lot more. I checked, and it's like multiple millions. But at the time, he got a pretty good deal. And check this: he put $30,000 down on the thing.
So 50% down.
Yeah,
wow.
50% down. And so the funny thing is his mom moved in with him. She just showed up, from Pittsburgh one day. And she's like, hey, I'm here. And she was a decent artist as well, and she would assist him with his drawings. I would say she was his first superstar, wouldn't you?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
She would continue to live with him for years, decades. She finally, she died I shouldn't say finally died, but she ultimately died in 1972.
Okay.
Now, here's the funny thing. He was working in the fashion industry and was rich, right? Mm-hmm. In the creative field, but he would schlep around the city in these ill-fitting clothes and worn-out shoes, carried his drawings in a grocery bag. He earned the nickname, you're going to love this, Raggedy Andy.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. I absolutely love that. Yeah. So this is funny because I'm a huge fan of Basquiat. And when you think about Basquiat, he was often presenting in that way, right? He would kind of schlep around New York and have, ill-fitting clothes and kind of always look disheveled and so forth. So I wonder if Andy Warhol sort of had an affinity for Basquiat because he
reminded him
a little bit a young, ambitious artist.
Yeah, kind of really challenging the norm, as it were. That's a really good observation. Young Andy had a lot of affinities for a number of people, and there was a common theme that keeps weaving through his affinities. And can I tell you a quick story about a person you mentioned in the Beats episode?
I would love this.
Truman Capote.
Oh, if Truman Capote's involved, I am sure there is a story.
Yeah, it gets funny. Soon after he arrived in New York, he started to pursue a serious art career, and it didn't happen for a while. But at the same time, he became obsessed with our friend, Mr. Truman Capote.
Okay.
And he began to write him fan letters, like daily fan letters.
Oh, wow.
And send him drawings. I shouldn't say send him drawings.
Yeah, you sound like Simon and his chalk drawings.
I know, yeah. And check this out. He even waited outside his house just to talk to him.
Oh, so did Capote also live in New York?
He did, yeah.
Okay.
He did.
And I guess he just looked him up in the phone book and then just went to his house.
And just hung outside. And he stalked Truman Capote, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was funny. In so much that his very first show in the early 50s, he did 15 drawings based on the writings of Truman Capote, but none of the pieces sold. And I know what you're thinking. What did Truman Capote have to say about all this?
The master of the bon mots, right? Yeah, what was his comeback?
And he bon moted the hell out of Andy. At first, his part, he really wanted nothing to do with him.
Sure.
He basically ignored him. There's a quote he said of Andy. He's one of those people, nothing is ever going to happen to. Just a hopeless born loser. Far as I know, he was just a window decorator.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, hello, Truman.
Yeah,
man.
To bastardize his quote about Kerouac, it's like, that's not art, that's decorating.
Yes, exactly. He's a born loser.
Obviously, he didn't mince words there.
No, it was pretty clear, wasn't it? I will say they went on to become friends when Andy became super famous.
Gee, go figure.
Go figure. Well, it's really generous of Mr. Capote.
Found time in his schedule.
He did, yeah. From smoking and drinking and bon mot creating. But, as I said, Andy was, I said in a previous episode of the Island of Misfit Toys, he was the misfittest of all the toys. So this obviously stung him and fed into his massive insecurities and his crippling anxiety.
Sure, yeah, I'm sure it bruised his ego.
Yeah, but this would become a theme in helping to shape how bizarrely Andy Warhol would iconically be and how he would go on to grow in the pop art world.
Hey, speaking of crippling anxiety, Todd, I'm suddenly feeling a little bit bashful about going to talk to our bartender.
Oh, my gosh, that's a new one.
Well, do you mind?
All right. I gotcha. All right. Well, sit here and manage your crippling anxiety and think of a few more bon mots, and we'll be back in a moment. Hi. We want to take a moment to mention that if you're enjoying this episode, we have an archive of topics ranging from the Olympics to movie posters.
Think Ghostbusters.
Iconic images.
Think Bigfoot.
Punk music.
The Ramones.
Saturday morning cartoons.
The Pink Panther.
And failed products like OK Soda. Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com for full episode notes and visuals, the latest blog content, and to sign up for our newsletter.
Follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Find the links on our website or search using the phrase "Two Designers Walk Into a Bar."
Most importantly, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you find podcasts like this.
And tell a friend about us. Send them a link to our podcast from your listening platform of choice.
And if you're inclined, buy our merchandise. Stickers, coasters, magnets, t-shirts. We're designers. We make good stuff, and it helps support the show.
Get in touch. Use the contact form on our website or send an email to hello@twodesignerswalkintoabar.com.
We read every message we get. Honest.
And we're available for speaking gigs. Email us to learn more.
Okay, now, back to the bar. All right, welcome back, everybody. We've been talking about how Andy Warhol became Andy Warhol and where we just left off.
Well, what we were talking about was how he was Truman Capote's punching bag for a while.
He was, yes, yeah, true. He got the Heisman from Truman Capote, but he was showing work, right?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, as we talked about, later they became buddies, so Mr. Capote didn't kill him, and that which does not kill you makes you stronger, right? So Andy pushed back.
Yes, and he persevered in exhibiting drawings in and around the city, and notably, his first group show was in 1956 at the Museum of Modern Art.
Wow, okay, so his first group show is at MoMA. Not too shabby. So it sounds like, he's doing these shoe illustrations, he's doing some magazine illustrations, so he's really got a foot in each camp, right? He's got one in his commercial art world where he's making literally his millions, but then he also has a foot, obviously, in the fine art world, so he's kind of straddling low art and high art, it sounds like.
He's trying. The foot in the high art just is not catching on.
Okay, so maybe it's more of a toe.
It is, yeah, it's a toe. It's not a toe hold. So his group show at the MoMA that we just talked about was with some fellow artists, and he took note of them. Like I said, he wanted to be kind of part of that scene, right? Robert Rauschenberg, his boyfriend, Jasper Johns, their work was inspiring Andy to expand his own artistic experimentation.
They've inspired me as well. I love those guys and their work.
They kind of straddle the abstract expressionism and the pop artists, right? Because they were using really graphic things. kind of building on that expression of stuff.
Sure, yeah. You've got Rauschenberg and his combines and his collages.
Yeah.
You have Jasper Johns with things like his targets and his American flags.
Yeah.
I love all the encaustic work he was doing with newspaper. Yeah, super duper cool stuff. I'm such a fan.
Yeah, and Andy wanted to be one of them because Rauschenberg had the pedigree, right? He was part of the Black Mountain School that we talked about before.
He was our neighbor, yep.
In beautiful Black Mountain, North Carolina, yes. And he did seek out Joseph Albers to study with. And from all accounts, the exiled European Albers really put young Robert through his paces, too.
So careful what you wish for.
Right. But he became a pretty huge luminary in the art world, and Andy was starting. So enough that Rauschenberg's lover, Jasper Johns, would also be gaining attention. And on the outside, sat Raggedy Andy.
I love that so much.
I know. Well, he got his revenge. I mean, that's why we can laugh at him now.
Sure.
So here's the funny thing. Both Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns wanted nothing to do with Andy because he was, quote, a lowly commercial artist, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like, wait a second.
yeah, right. I know. I mean, really, guys? And Andy was awkward, and he was homosexual, as was Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns, but yet they were military guys, and they were hiding it back in 1960, and they thought, in their words, quote, he was a bit too swishy for them. But he was clever and ambitious. That's a theme that runs through all of this. And he knew that nothing would enrage the serious art world and certainly get full attention like imagery that was created for normal, lowbrow, base amusement.
You mean us?
Us, yeah, exactly, us.
Oh, great.
Like he began getting inspiration from advertisements and comic strips. And as you remember in the first of this series, Lichtenstein did the same thing, Roy Lichtenstein. And
Yep.
he started doing comic strip paintings. And Andy said, they were obviously better than his. So he was like, I got to go another direction.
I need a new shtick.
Yeah. So hence he started doing serial repetition. And he was producing row upon row of dollar bills and green stamps and then finally soup cans. But he really liked the comic books, man.
Well, just like the comic strips, again, widespread, like easy vernacular for people to identify because everybody had Bazooka Joe gum. Everybody knew a nickel or dime comic or the Sunday comics in the paper. Yeah, you had talked about how Lichtenstein's son in the previous episode launched his career based on a dare, essentially, right? Bet you can't do something as good as this Mickey Mouse comic. But
yeah.
One other thing, though, and I think this goes back to Warhol knowing enough about commercial art and knowing enough about mechanical reproduction, things like dollar bills or green stamps, when those come, like when they're printed and produced, they aren't just this one-off thing that's pre-cut that rolls off the press, of course. They come off in sheets. They're made as multiples, especially stamps that come in books and are given to you as multiple things. And for those of you who are maybe younger and don't know what S&H green stamps are, they're sort of like the frequent flyer miles or the hotel points of their day.
Your loyalty cards.
Yeah, at the grocery store. You could save those and then you could redeem them and get different things beyond just groceries, right? They had Tupperware, lawn chairs, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Appliances.
Yeah.
It was basically the same model as if you go to an arcade and get a ticket. Like you pay $2 to play a game and you get 3 tickets, which equals nothing. So it was basically that same model.
It was skee ball at the grocery store.
It was, yeah. So late 1961, Andy stumbled upon what is obviously one of his most famous subjects, Campbell's soup cans. And he didn't paint just one. He painted 32 of them, as a matter of fact. And what he would do, he was trying his hardest to mechanically reproduce them. So there was not as much artist hand in there. So he would project them with like an opaque projector, trace them on canvas, and then apply thick, even coats of flat paint. And that, was really going against what the abstract expressionists were. They were about the expressive brushstrokes, right?
Right. Layers of paint, gestures all over the place.
Yeah.
He was also using things like stencils for all these repeated details, like the fleur-de-lis at the edges of the Campbell's Soup labels, and he used this wonderful kind of gold metallic paint. And it's so funny because from a distance, if you've ever seen these things in person, you look at them and you think, this is Campbell's Soup. But then you look at it up close and you realize because he was using these stencils, he only had one stencil. So nothing was really wrapping around the can in any sort of perspective. It's all just these sort of flat, almost like rubber stamp or block prints. It's really, really... But it makes it so fun because you really get these two layers. You get the sort of, again, imperfections that don't matter from a distance, almost like looking at a billboard like we were talking about, painted on the side of a building. It's like, well, I know that's a can of soup or a bottle of Coke, but then you get up close and you think, this is a little bit janky.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And this is widely documented, and you can find out so much about this, but his first solo exhibit, big solo exhibit in 1962 was in July, actually in Los Angeles. Couldn't buy a buck in New York because he was a low-down commercial illustrator, but participated in this show at the Ferris Gallery in Los Angeles, where he exhibited all 32 canvases.
How did he get attention in L.A.? Like, the media wasn't what it is now. Did he shop it there? How did he...
He did, yeah. He wrote, sent postcards to a variety of galleries. And this particular gallery, and probably more specifically, this particular gallery director, a guy named Irving Bloom, really thought it was something. I thought it was going to... this is new and this is fresh, and agreed to show all 32 varieties of Campbell's Soup. And what was interesting was they lined them all up like in a shelf, basically. Because he said, "Can sit on the shelf. Why not?"
I love that. Ironically, now, of course, the cans are in MoMA, so they're back on the East Coast, and they're hung in a grid, so they're not on a shelf anymore. Unless you think about, I guess, a grocery store, then they're on like a series of shelves, perhaps.
Right. And all of them are together at MoMA, too.
Yes.
And there's a funny little story behind that. Do you know the story?
No.
So, as I said, that the gallery show opened on July 9th in 1962, which, by the way, here's a fun fact for your trivia, was the same week that the first Walmart opened.
Oh, wow. Plant a flag in that for consumer culture.
I know. There you go. It couldn't have gotten any better. The show at the Ferris Gallery with the iconic Campbell's Soup cans did pretty shitty. It did. He sold only 5 of the works. Each one was about $100 a piece, by the way. And interestingly enough, one of the works went to Hollywood actor Dennis Hopper.
Oh, I could see that. I could totally see that.
Yeah, he was actually, I learned he was actually a pretty decent avant-garde art collector. But here's the funny thing. The dealer I just mentioned a minute ago, Irving Bloom, with the sale going so badly, he decided, this is a stroke of genius, that it would be worth keeping all of the paintings together as a group to be shown like that in the future. So he bought all 5 of the paintings back.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that goes against...
That's why they ended up at the MoMA then.
What I was thinking they could have done maybe was throw in a free can of soup with each painting purchased, and that would add a little value, which leads me to my next question for you about this. So what did Campbell's think? So this is all going on. He's talking to art galleries. He's not talking to Campbell's, but he's boosting this very well-known trade dress for these cans, because if it weren't well known, it wouldn't make sense for him to reproduce it.
Right. Well, I would say that given the times, it was a scrappy, unknown, raggedy artist that was copying your trademark. And as soon as the gallery show opened, the company sent over a lawyer.
Oh, they did?
You would expect.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
they did.
Okay, great. So they figured it out even in Los Angeles.
Yes, they did. They did. The then president and CEO of Campbell's, a guy named William Beverly Murphy, he indicated that he had some initial concern about the company's trademarks. That's when they sent the lawyers over to the Ferris Gallery. So they considered a cease and desist order, and oddly enough, the son of the inventor of condensed soup, a guy named John T. Durrance Jr., took over as chairman. And he was a passionate art collector and well-established in the art world, too. So as criticism of the show mounted and as publicity of the show mounted, the company just said, oh, we're going to pass on legal action right now.
Wow, that was a stroke of luck.
Yeah, well, and then it became a love fest because then they started courting Andy over time, and a year or so later, they were sending him letters and free soup by the crateful. And even in October of 64, they commissioned a silkscreen tomato soup picture from him. They introduced some promotional items, something called the super dress. You may have seen pictures of that.
Oh,
we can certainly post those.
the Campbell soup dress. Yeah.
It's a paper dress, right? With soup cans on it.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, those were offered for $1 plus 2 soup labels, but now if you can find one, it's going to run you over $8,000 to get a paper.
Yeah, because they probably are at the point of disintegrating.
Oh yeah.
As we're talking, I'm thinking about he really was the perfect person to figure this out, as opposed to, let's say, comic strips, because being a commercial artist, I think he had the designer's eye for understanding that, yes, on the one hand, this was disposable or ephemeral stuff, but on the other hand, it was beautiful work that took fine skills to pull together to make it pleasing both to the client, like Campbell's Soup, and also to the person buying the soup, that there was a message there. And I think if he hadn't had that commercial background with shoe drawings and window decorating, I'm not sure he ever would have arrived at this.
Yeah, who knows? Because, we certainly now have the benefit of history, and we appreciate that, and we know where it was all coming from, but no one knew at the time. It was just like, the hell is this? Why would someone even want to paint this, everyday object, much less elevate it to,
what,
32 versions?
It's sort of like the consumer version of a landscape. Instead of more trees. It's like, at least this is something different. Like it's taking something just as common as trees, but it's something man-made and ubiquitous, and it's saying, hey, there's beauty in this too.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, that was really weird back at that time, right?
Yeah.
I found a cartoon that you're going to love. And because, as you would imagine, the press also went nuts about this. And the Los Angeles Times ran this cartoon with one beatnik art lover.
Oh, yeah.
Saying to another, frankly, the cream of asparagus does nothing for me, but the terrifying intensity of the chicken noodle gives me a real zen feeling. I mean, does that just smack of, like, it takes a swipe at both of those
that's
cultures?
what I was going to say. It's a takedown of pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, back to Andy's progression. He certainly was looking to get the hand out of the work a lot more. So he started experimenting with silk screens and removing the kind of painterly stuff, as you said before, stencils, and depicted everything. Shipping labels, Coke bottles, coffee labels, Brillo soap boxes.
Oh, yeah. Giant wooden boxes. Actual boxes. Yeah.
I actually, a funny little story. When I was in high school, we took a trip to, it was probably Guilford College, the art gallery there. Mm-hmm. And they had Andy's Mott's apple juice boxes. And they were just sitting in the middle of this gallery room. And so, we were kind of walking around looking at stuff and pausing, waiting for people. And I started, not knowingly, just tapping on the boxes, just like you just lean on them, right? And I was just da 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 da, and a gallery person came, sir, that's art. I remember that so distinctly. That's art.
That's
okay.
Amazing. Yeah.
But he would go on to do more imagery that tried to shock people, from even more lowbrow, banal stuff, and to tabloid newspapers, things. I mean, you've seen those, right?
Yeah, shocking. One of the things that comes to mind, of course, is his electric chair series.
Right. And theoretically, he would love to do endless variations of a chosen subject. And this was when he started taking on real legit assistants, too.
Well, this goes back to your high school adventure. So he was using these techniques to ask the question of what is art? Which is, the same sort of thing our listeners often ask, I think, about some of the subjects we cover, or maybe the podcast itself. Then we're in great company then, aren't we? Exactly. People just haven't realized our brilliance yet.
That's true. I would say, we talk a lot about the Campbell's soup cans. He certainly is famous for that. But those were not famous at the time and didn't sell. But what did get a lot of attention and did sell were his portraits of Marilyn Monroe, who had just recently died. And that sent shockwaves through American popular culture. So if you think about it, like, here she was, like the queen of American movies, glitz and glamour, who had this tragic ending, and it was a perfect subject for him.
Because it was tragic. It was suicide.
Yeah. And, it was beautiful. It was glamorous. She was for him. And it was around this time in the U.S. that the term pop art actually was introduced at the Symposium on Pop Art, oddly enough, organized by the MoMA. And in true form, Andy was attacked for capitulating to consumerism.
Hold on a second here. So the pop and pop art means popular. And they're mad that his subjects were popular things.
Right. Maybe they were a little too popular, a little too populous.
A little too easily understood.
Yeah. They were a little appalled by his open acceptance of market culture, and that kind of set the tone for that reception.
So he served soup at the reception. The actual reception.
And Brillo pads.
Yeah, that's right, to clean up afterwards. Okay, so let's shift gears slightly. So he's cranking out all of this art. Is he at the factory at this point? Where is this stuff being made?
Well, not yet. It's coming. And you're right. He was creating a big mess at home. And,
Okay.
Mom was there. Mom was getting on him about it. So he had to find a studio. And a friend helped him find this old unoccupied firehouse on East 87th Street. And he offered the Department of Real Estate $150 a month just to rent this obsolete firehouse. And he started there in 1963.
Okay, let's hold on a second. Let me do some quick back of the envelope math here. You know what? That's still a hell of a deal today. So it's a bit under $1,500 a month for a full New York City firehouse.
Yes.
All right, this makes me wonder what the Ghostbusters paid in rent.
Yeah, true. I don't think they got a good deal like that. But he needed the space. He was starting to really do multiples of things and silk screening, and he did the Death and Disaster series.
Work's stacking up. He needs space.
Work's stacking up. And he's starting to get recognition, obviously, because of Maryland. And he was, he's obviously doing quite a bit there. And a few months into his tenure at the uninhabited firehouse, he was informed that it had to be vacated. So in November of that year, he found a loft on the 5th floor of 231 East 47th Street in Midtown Manhattan, which would become the first factory as we know it.
Ah, I see. Okay.
And there's a lot more to that story, which I think would be great to tell on another episode.
Oh, so this is a cliffhanger?
Yes, yes.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, if that's the case, then I'll tell you what. Let's think about what we should talk about next time over a fresh round of drinks. And since it's your topic, I would suggest it's your treat.
Oh, I gotcha. Who didn't see that coming, right? All right. See you later, everyone, and join us next time at the bar as we continue this conversation.